afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the 7th edition of the Astute Engineer. This is kind of a special one. Nigel Watts, known you for many years. Back in 1978, GEC Semiconductors, and then obviously through MEMIC, many years through demand creation, distribution, and your career's littered with pushing the envelope of UK distribution. So back then, what made you join the industry?
It's a good question. First of all, we'd just like to say thanks for the opportunity. It's great to be in front of you, Mark. And it was an accident. It really was. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was working in a menswear shop outside Ealing Broadway Station called Needs Menswear. And every lunch, I used to go to the Wimpy Bar for lunch. And I used to just have to walk past a small little employment bureau called Key. And I looked down one afternoon. I saw the card. It said, young trainee apprentice engineer wanted for a company in Wembley called GEC Semiconductors. I didn't know GEC. I didn't know what a semiconductor was. Some people might say I still don't. I applied for it and I walked in and I got the job. And my first job was testing the tolerances of capacitors, which was highly rewarding and interesting. And I soon moved on from that. But that was my entrance into the industry purely by luck. And the last 47 years it's gone past in a flash. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I mean, we talk about this all the time, about demand creation, what it really means, but MEMIC stood for it and stood head and shoulders above the rest of distribution. What was the mantra? What was the ethos back then?
I think not only did MEMIC profoundly believe in demand creation, I think he invented it to a large degree. Dick's philosophy, Dick Skipworth, who was the founder, a legend in himself, he was insistent that MEMIC was completely differentiated from the other distributors. And when we talk about other distributors, then we're not talking about Arrow, Avnet, Future, all of which are highly renowned organisations in themselves today. We're talking about German Industries. We're talking about Radio Resistor, the Access Alpha Group, Micromark. Latterly, a little startup called Astute Electronics, founded by Jeff Hill, who was himself at Barlec, another distributor. We had Hawk Components, Gothic Krellon, Radio Resistor, and all these were littered across the UK sector of electronics, which at the time was absolutely booming. I mean, what we now know the UK sector as in electronics today compared to when it was then, it's vastly different.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd love to have a kind of a map of what it was back then to what it is today. In fact, there was one of my customers up in Scotland years ago that used to have a map of all the electronic companies in Scotland, and it was vast. Yeah. And if you go back to early 80s distribution, the model was completely different. Demand creation, though. So what you're trying to lead with, still with the engineer, still with that long-term design aspect. Yeah. What's different between demand creation back in the 80s to what it is today then?
Well, certainly you didn't have the technology tools available then to influence the customer. It was all done on foot. And when you carried data books in the back of your car.
Change in your pocket.
Oh yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it really was a manual exercise, and I still think today, for me, I long for those days to be back because I'm a huge believer in it's a people's business, and its personalities and its contacts, and you build that wonderful word relationships. But demand creation in itself is an ethos, and I think you need two fundamental things to make a difference. You need the right technology, and you need the right people to be able to position and sell that technology and add value to your customer. And it's all about adding value to your customer. If you walk in with commodity products, that's not really adding value, certainly not at the technical end of the business. I said on many an occasion, you've got to have a product that makes the CTO of a company look up and say that again, because you've got to be the disruptor. You've got to change their thinking. You've got to move them in a direction that they perhaps weren't thinking they were able to give them an advantage in their markets.
So you mentioned before about the demand creation mimic, how they were looking at it, and we've talked about it in the past about being that stocking rep.
Right.
So you moved into the rep side of the business when you left Memic. What gap was you trying to bridge?
Well, there weren't very many reps in Europe at that point. And in fact, when we started Spectrum, we became the first ever pan-European rep. Right. And the significant difference, and it's worth touching on for a moment, there were reps, primarily individuals who were employed by the major semiconductor companies to run some direct accounts. And unfortunately, in those days, many of those direct accounts were actually acquired from distribution to fund the rep. So the rep became an immediate competitor to distribution, whereas the American model, which we brought into Europe, was assisting distribution to win designs, i.e. demand creation. So we were a demand creation win rep working alongside distribution to grow the markets for the semiconductor manufacturers. But if I'm brutally honest, and the other members of Spectrum at the time who've got the same scars I have, trying to work with distribution back in the early days, we weren't exactly warmly welcomed.
Wow, that's exactly what just came through my mind. Everyone wants to have that winning ticket, but so how did you clear that pathway?
I would say for the first year, we probably sold more to distributors than we did to end customers.
Really?
No. And we used to walk in fact, I wrote the 10-point charter of what we will do with distribution going forward. And, and we stuck to it. You've got to deliver on your word. And I remember there was another distributor I didn't mention before. There was a distributor called Pronto out in Essex. And the guy that ran it was a guy called Diamond, either Bob or Tony Diamond. And he had a product manager called Bob Fruin. And we were brought into a conference room. We were sat down and we had the entire sales force there. We didn't get a chance to talk about Cypress Semiconductor. We just spent an hour and a half being basically questioned as to our intention on how much of their business we were going to steal.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that leads me to a nice point, actually, that maybe we should throw that out to any of the listeners, but wouldn't it be nice to get a list of who all those disties were? Excuse my terminology calling them disties, but back in the UK in the 80s and how that landscape's changed. But I mean, when we first met, which was 20 odd years ago, that example actually rings true because you guys were the rep, Semtech was the manufacturer, we were a distributor, and we had the end customer. But I thought what was quite refreshing about that, and you still stick firm by that, we can all win together, we're stronger collectively. And okay, margins were slimmer, but we all won from that. The customer won, you guys won, and we got ourselves embedded in the customer. Is that kind of how the rep system should work?
Oh yeah, primarily. I mean, there are reps and reps. There are those reps that are wholly focused on a set of tier one direct accounts working for a niche line who never needed distribution. Right. But as soon as you get into a distribution environment, especially now, with the dilution of customers and also line cards have grown excessively within distributors. So how do you get mind share of the sales force? You've got to work alongside them. You've got to be a trusted partner, which is a phrase used far too much and not delivered on. But I mean, I spent, as a rep, when we started Spectrum in 94, for the next 5 years, I probably spent half my time riding shotgun in a car with a distribution sales guy. And sometimes I was used, for the engineering visit. Other time I was used as a political pawn almost by the distributor saying to the customer, look, we've got the manufacturer support here. I knew that, didn't worry me because it means we got buy-in into the customer. Customers saw that a distributor was being supported by the manufacturer. The deal worked.
And there must have been some resistance from certain manufacturers to give a rep commission. I mean, is it the big guys who just want it all? Or, I mean, what was your strategy there?
Well, the commission deals, I mean, when we first signed back in the 80s and into 1994 when we started Spectrum, for the first 10 to 12 years, it was actually a wonderful experience because the commission was X, whatever that was, and you got paid all of X. Sure, some manufacturers started to trim it off a little bit, but the big change came. The big change came with globalization. And when you had design in one territory, production in another, then you got the dreaded split.
Yep.
And then it was very political and emotional. How much split would go where, then the commission rate would be reduced. I mean, I can clearly remember a VP of sales once, who remained nameless, telling me that commission rate had gone down from, in this instance, 5% to 4%. And no emotion, that was just it. And it was a significant reduction, or commission number we were talking about. And when I kind of objected, he turned around and said, it's only 1%. I said, no, it's 20%. You've just taken away 20% of my income. And you're expecting my sales organisation to be just as motivated, just as challenged tomorrow as they are today. You've got to think about this. And the conversation went on. Where did it lead? The commission rate was reduced. And if you look at today, especially in the rep world, and that's why I'm no longer a rep today from that point of view, it's very difficult to sustain a rep model.
Yeah, I can see that. And you talk about globalization, and the internet has changed everything. But when I look at how the communication routes have changed, like I said, when I first went on the road here, you'd have lots of change in your pocket. You would have a roadmap. You would have your A to Z of customers. You would remember everyone's phone number pretty much.
Absolutely.
So how are you bracing AI? What do you think about AI in our industry?
Well, AI is here. It's here to stay. We have to embrace it. We should embrace it, and we should embrace it to our advantage. All right. If I draw the parallels, we had the wheel, then we had steam power, then we had yeah, we did, and each of those was a fundamental change to the human race. This is another one, okay, probably more fundamental and probably deeper and wider in terms of its implications going forward. But it's not going to go away, so we might as well embrace it and use it to the best of our ability to actually create more business for more people. So rather than putting people, as the big fear always is, it's going to put people out of work. Like every other technical revolution, yeah, jobs are lost in one sector, but gained in others. And we've got to look to be able to achieve that and the quality of life going forward for everybody. Now, there are good players or good actors and bad actors. That's always been the case and always will be the case. It's how we manage that process that's important.
So, yeah, and I agree. I think anyone who is not understanding AI as a benefit, just got to find a way of how you benefit from it. You must have a different group of tool sets now. So what kind of AI tools are you using?
I think in common with most other people, I mean, I've got a ChatGPT account. I use Copilot. One of the astute guys, even today, asked me a question about a certain thing that's troubling him at the moment. And I did the comparison on Copilot and handed it to him, and he said, that's fantastic. I said, well, you could have done that in 30 seconds. People just got to know that it's available. We're also using AI now without even knowing it, because some of the things that we've always been using online have got AI built in. So some of the answers we're getting back for questions we're asking are already AI assisted. Yep. So it's already playing a part. I think you've probably come onto it, but being a sales guy back in pre-social media days, certainly pre-COVID, to being one now, is a major step. I think it's far more of a challenge for a sales guy today than it was back in the the noughties. And
so, what do you think is a challenge? I look at in two different aspects. I think they've got much wider and broader tool set that they can use, but then they've also got a much wider and broader competition threat. I mean, I look at LinkedIn, and I know you're very active on LinkedIn. and I think there's some amazing technology there, and it's a great forum. But I know you've got opinions on LinkedIn. I think maybe it's lost its way. People need to start to be genuine. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's become far too advertorial. It's diluted itself as a platform, and I find it more difficult to navigate to get to valuable content. That's for sure, and I think we've got to be smarter about how we use it. It's almost a victim of its own success. I joined it in 2007, I think. It was LinkedIn just. I think maybe, apart from the founder itself, who I actually met him once, quite an incredible guy. But yeah, the use of social media is valuable, and there are ways of penetrating into customers and markets that other platforms don't provide you with. But some of the art of selling has gone. Yeah, I agree. And if I may, just for a moment, just to harp on that, you can send 50 emails when one phone call would suffice. Mm-hmm. In one phone call, I can find out if a person is married, so they've got children, where they go on holiday, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can find out more about that interpersonal relationship. How many emails would I have to send and receive in order to get that done? I'm still a great believer in the interpersonal relationship of actually developing business, and I hope that never goes away.
So let's stick on that, because I'm 100% agreeing with you. And the first art of selling is actually listening, and you can't listen unless you're on a call, right? Because every email gets misinterpreted. But we've talked many times on these podcasts and many conversations I've had with you and others. How do we get youngsters into our industry when there's a lot of social skills that have been lost? So how do we encourage that?
Well, the younger generation have got a very different opinion to the world that we have.
Our Gen Z here.
Our Gen Z here, yeah. So they call them Gen Z for a start. That's kind of labelling them unnecessarily. Oh, I prefer Z. I'm a Brit. Sorry to everyone in America listening to this right now, but I'm definitely a Z. But there again, it's not really different from comparing us with our previous generation. My father was, when he was in his mid to late 50s, he looked like a man in his mid to late 50s heading towards retirement. I'm beyond that now, and yet I'm still looking forward to working for the next 10 or 15 years of my life, God willing. I think we've got to encourage and embrace and motivate the younger generation to want to do this. We're an obstacle for them. And until we actually move on into retirement or do whatever we're going to do next, we won't give them the freedom that they actually need and they want. I've actually created in my own environment an apprenticeship scheme, and I've taken on my first true apprenticeship, started 3 weeks ago, and we're interviewing for another one tomorrow. I believe in it. Yeah. You've got to get young, fresh, motivated people into your business, and you've got to provide them with a valuable, meaningful succession plan, and then your business can develop. We need new thinking. It's going to happen, and we want to embrace it.
So stick on that apprenticeship then. So obviously now with Trailing Edge, you're still very valuable to the Astute board and what you offer there. But with the Trailing Edge, are you looking at bringing that? Is it like a more of a mentorship you're doing with the apprenticeship, sort of brain dump from what you've got, or have they got specific pathways you're trying to create? What are you trying to do?
Both.
Right.
So my first apprentice, and I'll name him Alfie, great guy. He's arrived in from Henley College with a year of business studies, general business studies under his belt. But you walk into a practical environment like this, and the world changes overnight. Mm-hmm. So we want to give him a pathway into sales, marketing, operations in electronics. If that's where he wants to be, 3 weeks in, he probably doesn't even begin to know what he wants right now. But from my point of view, I've been in the industry 47 years. I've had a few mentors along my career path that have served me well. If I can give him a head start and others like him, I'd be delighted. And it's not about me. It's not about an ego or anything else. I just want to encourage people to come into this industry, because if you look at the succession planning in general, the electronics industry, it's very poor. We turn up at exhibitions every year, and generally we're just getting slightly slower and more grey, you and I excluded. And it won't be long before ramp access is mandatory in exhibitions. We need younger people coming in with new ideas, new qualities and new energy. And it's up to us now to bring those people in before it's too late, because we've got an awful lot of IP in ourselves that we need to pass on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's definitely a couple of generation gaps in our industry. But you talk about new ideas and innovation. I know you're a champion for that. So where do you see technology going? We've got IoT. We talked about AI. It's scary, but where do you see the developments?
One thing I'm convinced about, and having been in the industry as long as I have, there's no end game. This just continues to evolve. I call them evolutionary circles. We go round in a pattern, but we always end up one level above where we started. And this industry will continue to do that, but at an ever-increasing pace. So what took 5 to 10 years now takes 3 to 5, will take 1 to 3, and it's the ability of the human race actually to adapt to the rate of change that's going to be the challenge, not the actual technology itself. The technology will march on regardless. It's up to us to try and keep pace with it and make good of that. I mean, I have some very Arthur C. Clarke type, Asimov type visions in my head. You know, I look at the M25 today and see it as a leisure track in about 50 years' time, because the cars will be in the air. Well, why not? And if you walk around London suburbs at the moment, the cars are double parked. Well, what if the cars weren't there at all, because they're all in major underground car parks? Nobody owns a car anymore, but as soon as you want one, you press your button on your mobile and it arrives in 2 minutes and takes you where you want to be. Perfectly feasible. And AI will be the driver of all that.
Yeah, I mean,
excuse the pun.
It's going to increase the pace of change, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know where it's going to go. Maybe we've had too many nights in pubs debating it, but
well, let's hope they remain.
Yeah, well, that is important. But I do think that there's some real neat and innovative companies in the UK that we can still champion and push.
Absolutely.
I know that what you've been trying to do is give them a foundation and a platform to be able to launch, but we are still fighting against some very big players. Mm-hmm. How is and not getting into politics, so we haven't got long enough here, but what's your view? You talked to me before about this semiconductor industry being $1 trillion in the next 5 years, but we all know what's the apprehension about Taiwan. So, we've seen tariffs, mm-hmm. We've seen the impacts, and we're starting to feel that. A lot of the customers are feeling that pain. We've got a good supply chain team that are redirecting, but Taiwan's got to be a conversation that you've had many times.
Yeah.
What's your personal view?
Well, I worked for a Taiwanese company for 3 years. I was the president of EMEA for WPG, and Taiwan. It's a very difficult thing to quantify. It's there for reasons that everybody knows without getting into the politics. Yep. Finance has got a huge amount to do with it. And the fact it's manifested to be so dominant as the single largest country in which semiconductors are made worldwide, it's something I think over time will correct itself. And again, I don't want this conversation to lapse into an existential threat from anyone or anywhere. I do believe a rebalance will take place over the next, not 3 to 5 years, maybe 15 to 20 years. Right. Absolutely. This is not an overnight issue. I mean, there's a lot of money being poured into various regions of the world now to start to put, a fab today, building a fab is a $15 to $20 billion expenditure, and it takes 3 to 5 years to get that thing up and running. So nothing's going to happen quickly, but it will happen. There'll be a rebalancing of distribution.
I agree, and I think if you go back to the Semiconductor Chip Act that Biden signed, the key directive was to reshore some of that manufacturing back to America. But I think one of the ingredients they forgot is the experience of the personnel working. They need to either reshore them or upskill them. So that is going to take 5, 10, 15 years. But what about Europe? I mean, if you go, we talk about the landscape of what distribution looked like back in the 80s. Well, we got 2, 3 players in Europe who manufacture semiconductors.
Yeah, NXP, Infineon, and struggling for the third.
There you go.
And
so what do we do in Europe?
Well, in pure factual terms, the semiconductor TAM, which we used to be about 30% of the world at one stage, the semiconductor TAM in Europe is now sub 10%. Sub 10, and likely to fall away further. Now, you've got to counterbalance that with the fact that the TAM has grown significantly. Yep. So you've got a larger number. But the fact of the matter is now, there aren't as many manufacturing plants in Europe as there used to be. Yep. It's now contract manufacturing, and that's largely offshore. Yep. And that's largely offshore for 2 reasons. Number one, the first driver was cost, to your point, but the second driver now is obviously where the people are. And the experience is to actually fulfill the function. So it's more complex than just money now. And Europe has become certainly not a backwater. I mean, from a technology point of view, Europe is still driving an awful lot of innovation. That's why we saw such inward investment we did last week. And I think that will continue. But in terms of the spend, it will continue to drop as an overall percentage of the TAM of the semiconductor industry, but the number will increase because of the rate of growth of the industry itself.
Yeah, and it's kind of difficult to put into figures because one's gone much quicker than the other. But I guess Europe's also going to be hit with the automotive market dropping substantially.
Yeah, I mean,
that must have been the major consumer of those electronics.
Well, in the last 30 years, I mean, the German automotive industry set Germany aside in electronics. I mean, okay, they've also got a very stable, large industrial base of electronics. I mean, that's Germany's pride. But the automotive industry was phenomenal, and everyone can see what's happened to that. Certainly post-COVID, and the forecast for the next 5 years looks tough. But I'm still a great believer in Europe and EMEA. I think we've got a huge amount of innovation and skill set to offer the world. And just to put that figure you said $1 trillion for the semiconductor business, it will be $1 trillion. But the thing people have got to realise, it took 50 years to get to 500 billion, which is still a large number. But it took 50 years for the semiconductor business worldwide to grow to 500 billion, and only another 7 to double. Yeah. That tells you what the advancement of the semiconductor is worldwide. So there's huge opportunities for growth in every region. Some will grow larger and faster than others. India, for now, is a great example of a rapidly growing TAM, and it follows the lowest cost centre movement away from China into India. And where next? Mm-hmm. I mean, could we say in 15 to 20 years' time there'll be large-scale contract manufacturers in Central Africa? Mm-hmm. Why not? Yeah. When I joined the industry, there was virtually nothing in China.
Really?
In terms of electronics, so lots of people, but they weren't in the electronics industry.
So do you think the industry has recovered from COVID? I mean, that pandemic shocked everyone. Distribution, supply chain, manufacturing.
Recovered is a strange word. I don't think it's recovered. I don't think anything's recovered. The world's altered. And if you look at how we do our business since COVID, it's changed dramatically. Pre-COVID, I may have had a video call once a month, twice a month. Mm-hmm. During COVID, 7 hours a day, and even now, probably 2 to 3 hours a day on a video call of some description. Mm-hmm. People are accepting less and less direct visits than they used to, even though the threat of COVID has gone away. Hybrid working now means that you can't access the people in their offices 5 days a week. They might be there 3, and they're certainly not going to accept you into their house to go and do an engineering call. The world's changed, and we have to adapt with it. Whether it's changed for the better or for the worse, that's people's own perception. For me personally, in business, I think I've found it tougher to actually get. If you're in business before with lots of established relationships, then all that's happened is your calendar's changed and your diary's changed, but you're still doing the same business with the same people. If you're trying to access new business with a new business in new markets, it's far tougher.
I do get that. And you're absolutely right. I think the upside and the downside go hand in hand with video conferencing. Earlier this week, I had a meeting in Sweden, in Finland, in Italy, and in Germany, and you wouldn't have been able to do that pre-COVID. We'd have all been jumping on planes, and but at the same time means you're never away from the phone or from your laptop.
That's true.
The impact of something new in business, it's very easy for people to say no to that meeting, and it's very easy to cut them off on the video call. So I get your point. It's very tough to access a new market, which, thankfully we've been established in this industry for a few years now. So I'm sure you get lots of access. We could go on and on. I think the looking back, I like that. I like to actually, people like yourself looking back and talking about where the industry's come from, and you're still excited about where it's going, which is kind of refreshing after all these years. Alcohol helps, I know that. But normally ask people to talk about a book that's inspired them or a podcast. But I think for you, my question is going to be slightly different. Right. So for you, you've changed your direction of travel. Although your pathway's been pretty straight, you've actually had a few shifts along the way. Mm-hmm. Who's been the biggest influencer on you through that journey? I mean, you mentioned Skipworth, and I know that lots of people who worked at Memic were serious. But what about you personally?
That's a really good question. Both inside business and outside business. Okay.
You as a person.
Okay. Me as a person, family is always important, and my mum and my father were big influences on me because, I was born and raised in central London, in a very flat, average standard of living. But my mum and dad always pushed and drove us to go and do better, get on with life. Now, my brother's a great example. He's a PhD in military history, and he's done extremely well, and he's got books written, and he's got his ISBN numbers. I'm a sales guy, and I have no issue with that at all. I'm very proud to be a sales guy. I've enjoyed my life tremendously. So there are certain people along that route that I can name a couple now who people perhaps won't recognise because they were part of my early years. There was a guy called Peter Huggins when I was at GC Semiconductors and I first broke into sales. He had the guts, I guess, to hand me a set of keys at the age of 20 and tell me to go and run a sales patch selling Intel. For GC Semiconductors, a distributor. So I was out on the road at 20 years old. I mean, I walked into purchasing offices and met men older and women older than my parents and tried to sell to them. I'm not an old-looking guy now in that respect. Imagine what I looked like when I was 20. I was still pre-O level, but I just got out on the road and did it. So Peter was a major inspiration to me. As I went through. If I look around the globe and people I've met, there's one particular man called Dan McCraney, who was the VP of sales at Cypress Semiconductor. Probably the most consummate salesman I've ever met in my life. He really was. He could change the attitude of a room just by walking in it. And he's still alive today. And in fact, I saw him on LinkedIn the other day. He's taken up a non-exec position in another company, and he went on from being a VP of sales through to being chairman of a couple of significant semiconductor companies, including On Semiconductor. Great guy, just a consummate professional. And as well as being, like most of us should be, there's two sides of us. We're consummate professionals, hopefully, and also we know how to enjoy ourselves. And that's a perfect mix. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be a social animal as well as a business animal, mixed and play the two in tandem. Aside from that, I've got sporting heroes who I admire. But
don't talk about Chelsea.
I wasn't going to talk about Chelsea, actually, but as you mention it, I'm still not going to talk about Chelsea.
We can edit this.
Yeah.
But sporting hero then?
Going back many years, Ian Botham, big cricket fan. Headingley, I think it was 81. Headingley 81 was still one of the. Every time I think of that innings, it's fantastic. Yeah, Muhammad Ali as a boxer, fantastic. Pick any sport because I'm a huge sport fan. There are moments in sport that inspire you when people come from, they come from adversity, they win, and that totally gets it for me. So it's not just about one or two mentors, or people that have inspired me. It's about events. It's about people coming from behind and making a real go of something. I think that's hugely inspirational for me.
Yeah, and I think if you talk about those names, they're mavericks. They were always different. They tried to behave differently. They, I guess, went across the norm. They weren't your standard approach. Both of them was always going against establishment. But I suppose that's not too dissimilar to how you've been in trying to break the mould and be different.
Yeah, you're right. And let me be honest, it hasn't always benefited me. I perhaps my career, in some senses, might have progressed a lot better if I'd have learned to shut up now and again.
Toe the line.
But actually, you're right. That's not me, and I never want it to be me either. At the end of the day, if you believe in something passionately, do it, providing you're not hurting somebody else, or if you really believe in what you do, put your money where your mouth is and get on with the job.
Yeah, I totally agree. Give people the opportunity to fail and help them get back up.
Yeah.
Nigel, been an absolute pleasure.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
And we avoided any conversation about Chelsea, so that's perfect.
Yeah, and just for now, we'll keep it that way. Mark, thank you very much.
Okay.
Great to see you.
Thank you very much for listening. You know the social channels to follow us on. Any ideas? We are going to have a couple of interesting podcasts already planned in for the next couple of months. If you want us to go down a different route, give us a shout. Thank you.
Thanks.